They had boat rentals operating on my lake before I even realized something was wrong, with a wooden price board nailed directly into my shoreline post. A teenage kid stood beside 3 bright kayaks tied to a dock I had never approved, calmly collecting $8 from strangers who believed the lake access belonged to the HOA. I parked near the shoreline that Saturday morning and watched a family push a rented kayak into water that legally belonged to me. That moment settled deep in my chest. Not explosive anger, but a slow-spreading realization that someone had quietly taken control of something I spent 15 years earning. My name is Sam Greer, 41 years old, structural engineer from Knoxville, Tennessee, and owner of 12 quiet acres along the western shoreline of Heron Lake. The property stretches across wooded hillside down to 200 feet of clear lake water, where a narrow creek inlet feeds cool currents. I bought that land 4 years ago after saving nearly every spare dollar since my mid-20s while living in cramped rental apartments. This was never meant to be an investment or rental property for strangers looking for vacation photos and weekend entertainment. It was meant to be a permanent place that belonged completely to me. Heron Lake Shores HOA governed the residential development on the opposite side of the lake, where 200 homes surrounded community, docks, and manicured waterfront parks. My land existed separately on the western shore, with a deed dating back decades before the subdivision was ever built. During the purchase process, I examined every document carefully, because engineers develop habits around verifying every assumption before committing resources. The paperwork confirmed exactly what I expected. My 12 acres and my section of shoreline had absolutely no connection to the HOA or its rules. The lake access, the land, and every inch of shoreline were private property listed solely under my name. The HOA president responsible for the unexpected dock was Craig Delaney. Craig was 45 and owned a boat dealership in nearby Lenoir City. His approach to lakes involved revenue, rentals, and opportunities rather than quiet water and personal space. During his 3 years running the HOA, he expanded docks and added storage programs for resident boats. Apparently, his next idea involved turning my shoreline into a kayak rental hub. The Western Creek Inlet on my land produced the best fishing water on the entire lake. Craig apparently decided that made it perfect for visitors paying hourly rental fees. The dock had been installed while I was away in Atlanta on a 6-week engineering project. I returned home expecting calm water and quiet shoreline. Instead, I found a small commercial operation built directly on my property. I photographed everything from multiple angles for nearly 10 minutes without saying a word. The kayaks, the dock posts, the rental price board, and the kid collecting cash were all clearly visible. Then I walked back up the hill to the house and made my first call. I called my Uncle Ray. Ray Greer spent 31 years in the United States Marine Corps before retiring as a master gunnery sergeant. He answers the phone the same way he approaches most things in life, calm and focused. When I described the dock and the rental operation, he said very little. He simply told me he would arrive in 45 minutes. My second call went to Donna Hatch, a property and water rights attorney in Loudoun County. She listened quietly as I described everything I had found along the shoreline. When I finished, she told me the situation legally qualified as trespass and unauthorized commercial use of private property. The dock alone represented a serious encroachment issue. The rental business operating from my shoreline made the legal exposure significantly worse. She advised me to document everything carefully and avoid touching the structure. Evidence mattered more intact than removed. Ray arrived in 43 minutes exactly. We walked down to the dock together while a couple paid for canoe rental beside the price board. Ray stood quietly near the water's edge, watching the scene with that steady marine stillness. After a moment, he asked one simple question. "What do you need?" I told him I needed him standing there while I made several calls. He nodded and remained beside the dock as if planted into the shoreline. I returned to the house and called Donna again with additional details from my photographs. Then I contacted the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office non-emergency line and reported an unauthorized commercial operation on private land. A deputy said someone would arrive within the hour. My final call went directly to Craig Delaney. He answered confidently with the tone of someone enjoying a normal Saturday morning. I introduced myself as the owner of the Western Shoreline property. Then I explained that his association had built a dock and rental business on land that belonged to me. I also informed him I had already contacted my attorney and the sheriff's department. The silence on his end lasted long enough to become informative. Craig finally suggested there might have been an access agreement with the previous owner. I calmly told him no such document existed in my closing paperwork. The deputy arrived about 35 minutes later and walked with me down to the dock. The teenage rental worker was still accepting cash from fishermen. The deputy reviewed my deed records and spoke briefly with the kid running the rentals. Ray stood nearby watching everything with quiet attention. Craig arrived 20 minutes later in an SUV, displaying an HOA logo magnet. He began explaining the situation confidently until he noticed Ray standing at the water's edge. His tone shifted noticeably after that moment. The deputy quickly confirmed that the shoreline belonged entirely to me. The rental operation was immediately suspended. The teenage worker packed his cash box and left shortly afterward. Craig admitted the dock installation had been authorized through the HOA Activities Committee. According to him, the rental program had already been operating for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of strangers paying money to use my property. Donna delivered a formal legal demand package the following Monday. It required removal of the dock within 14 days at the HOA's expense. It also demanded a full accounting of all rental revenue collected during the unauthorized operation. The document included compensation for commercial use of my shoreline and payment of my legal fees. Craig hired a Knoxville attorney named Marcus Webb almost immediately. Negotiations began within 2 days. Several HOA board members privately expressed concern once they realized what had happened. Internal pressure inside the association increased quickly. 3 weeks later, a settlement agreement was finalized. The HOA removed the dock from my shoreline exactly 12 days after the demand letter. I watched the entire structure lifted out of the water from my porch. The rental records showed $4,200 collected in fees. Every dollar was returned to me as part of the settlement. Additional damages for commercial use of my shoreline totaled $15,500. The county also recorded an official document confirming the HOA had no access rights to my land. 2 months later, Craig Delaney quietly resigned from his position as HOA president. A new board leader sent me a handwritten note promising better communication with neighboring property owners. I thanked her and wished the community well. Ray returned in November to help finish the retaining wall project we started earlier. One evening, we sat quietly beside the creek inlet, watching a blue heron hunt along the water. I thanked him for coming that Saturday morning when everything began. He shrugged and said, "Sometimes the most useful thing a person can do is simply stand somewhere." The lake eventually returned to its normal quiet rhythm without strangers launching rental kayaks. Today, a small private mooring holds only my fishing boat and my own kayak beside the shoreline. The water still reflects the same mountains and sky, but now everyone understands exactly who owns the land beside it.